we can slow down a lot and not lose things. We gain things when we do. We shouldn't be putting our bodies in a state of fight or flight or in a state of survival constantly. That's where burnout happens, is because that's a chronic state now.
I'm Stephen Bradshaw, and this is Snowball Psychology.
Kim, I'm so happy to have you on this podcast.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. We have gotten through quite a troubleshooting morning. I'm proud of us. No one I would have rather done it with than you.
For listeners, we've spent 40 minutes trying to get the conditions right for this recording.
Yeah.
Put our yogic practices to the test.
No, we breathed.
So the way I like to start these conversations is around the idea of the snowball and getting onto your authentic path, a life that's congruent with your inner world, that really works for you. And you share with me, having had a prior career in business, you were more on the account executive, marketing side of things, startup side of things.
Okay.
Before becoming a therapist. And I know there was some phases to that reorientation. I think it would be a good place to start, to just lead us through your path that led to you being a therapist.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, like you said, kind of started off in more the corporate side of things after I graduated. I was led to a career that was kind of creative and strategic, and I thought all of that stuff was and still is intellectually stimulating to me, right? To be in advertising or to be at a tech company or a startup, right? I was young and in my 20s and moving from San Francisco to New York City and really, really enjoying it. And all of it kind of got old quickly. I'm sure I'm not the only one who can resonate with that experience. I at some point started kind of looking above me at, the people, where my path was headed. And seeing that not all of them were super happy in their careers. And I started looking around me. And I think at the time, too, I had been doing, gotten into my own therapy, of course, had started doing a lot of yoga. And I think that there's a lot of stuff that changes internally we can't even account for. It's like you blink and suddenly you're kind of a different person wanting different things, right? You just notice things a little bit differently. So I think that was all happening inside. What else? I think I started... wanting a little more meaning and wanting a little more fulfillment. I actually, and I can go into this a little more detail if it's relevant later, I started kind of reaching for stuff on the side, like side hustles, right? I started a little fundraising thing around fitness and physical exercise and how that...
Is that when you started National Fitness Day?
That's correct. Yep. It was, it started just as kind of a little fundraiser. I called it Class for a Cause. And the idea was I had gotten really into fitness and physical activity and exercise. I had trained for a half marathon, which I am not a runner. I am a yogi. But it was I think it was a huge unlock in my life. For the first time, I did something that I was not good at. And I found that I could do it, right? If you trained, if you took it one step at a time. This probably dovetails really nicely into the idea of snowball, right? I think I took for granted that you can add to a snowball, right? You're not born, right? A runner or a yogi or whatever it is. It takes time and it takes building muscles and stuff. So that was a huge moment of growth for me to not only feel good because I was feeling really, really healthy, right? And active and prioritizing, right? Getting up for my runs instead of staying out drinking and all of that kind of stuff. But it really contributed to the sense of growth mindset, right? That you can do more, you can do hard things, right? And I thought that was just phenomenal. I wanted to share that with the world, right? So I started a little fundraiser. I was like, I want to, raise money for, physical activity for people in communities where that's maybe not accessible or whatever it is. And
you obviously think differently to most folks. that
Yeah.
that you even thought you could start a national day for something.
I think that's it. I think there's a benefit to being young and naive in your 20s. You think, anything is possible and you're invincible. And it is, right? But I think, I was so much more in that mindset, of I can do whatever, let me try. And that was a really cool, magical time, right? So yes, being in marketing, kind of everything I was doing in my company, right, in social media at the time, at least, you're always trying to find the national ice cream day, the national whatever day, right, to sell and to like make something out of, because social media is daily content. And that's the first way we had to do that. And I noticed there was no National Fitness Day. And so I was like, I am going to do this. So I rallied a bunch of people. I spent a couple of years, right, really getting the idea kind of going and adopted, and we got it on the national calendar and stuff. And that was really, really cool. So yeah, this is when the kind of disconnect between my day job and something that felt more meaningful, I was more passionate about, kind of started. I will go
I want to pause.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to pause on this moment because so I talk about the fresh snowfall, before the snowball can roll, you need something to build up a potential, something to build up enough self-energy in IFS terms, or just enough energy, just simply kind of, something that tends to your inner world.
Yeah.
And so you were doing the yoga, therapy, and then this fitness aspect.
Yes.
And so that feels like you were really tending to something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And none of it was, I'm sure it was intentional, right? I was a very big self-help, self-development, right? Like that was a thing. I want to be the best version of me. And so I was filling my cup with a lot of that stuff, right? New ideas from books and everything. But I think even the fitness community was a really cool place for me to grow and be, just like the therapy community is now. When I was really exposed to new ideas and new ways of thinking, right? It was a lot of people who were not in corporate or had not been in corporate. And we would, I met friends in New York City, and they'd have little small groups, and we'd get together and kind of talk about life and talk about our goals and stuff. And it was just cool to see a different way of thinking, a different way of a lot of entrepreneurs, right? Like to say like, oh my gosh, the way that I've been taught and trained is success, right? Going through something like, for me, AP classes, Berkeley, whatever it is not the only version, is not the only way. So I think that was a big part of that snowfall too, right? It was actually the different communities and different people and different ideas. I think I can attribute a lot of that to that too.
I missed that about New York. I also spent a couple of years there. I felt like every time you got together with friends, a few extra people would join. There was just these little like social groupings would just spring up constantly in New York.
Yeah.
I don't think LA is like that.
No, but you know what? You make it like that with your Beyond meetups and stuff. I would say it's so hard to make happen, and it's so hard to find out here. But I actually think I have you to thank for the community that I'm in around here. And yeah.
Yeah, we need to do more of it.
Yeah.
My efforts are paltry compared to the need, I feel. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. That's the thing about New York. It's so easy, right? You walk down the street. It's like, yeah.
I think there's a way that East Coasters are more communal. They just naturally group more easily.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think it's also I remember very distinctly, right? The apartments are so small out there. The philosophy is, right? You don't spend time at home. You spend time outside of your home. And, again, this was my life stage and I wasn't settled down. And there's people in New York who probably live quite differently. But I remember very much like when I moved there, people said, don't worry about the size of your apartment, right? The point of being in New York City is to spend it outside and to be out at the, restaurants and then the culture and the parks and with people, right? There's the very inherent to the culture out there. I think that's a great, reflection.
Yeah, I was thinking, doesn't Carrie Bradshaw keep her shoes in her oven, I think, in her apartment?
Right. You don't cook in New York.
And I think what you mentioned there is important. New York is for your 20s and maybe 30s. As you get further down, you were talking about the people that had been in the those careers further on and had stayed in that grind, it didn't look so good, right?
Yeah. And not to knock anyone who chooses that and that's right for them. I just know I saw a lot of examples of people who stayed there because they didn't see that there were other options, right? You just kept climbing the ladder, right? Once you're on it, that's kind of you never questioned, right? Or eventually, right, again, and reasonably so, you stay in a career for so long, you climb up the ladder, and then you do have different responsibilities, and it makes it harder to make a change or get out of it. I have a big empathy and compassion for that, but I think I saw the writing on the walls early, and I'm really grateful I did.
Yeah, I'm curious of what you saw in those people further up the ladder. I have my own
I was going to ask
remembrance
you too.
of it.
Yeah. I'm actually trying to remember the specifics. It's a really good question. I don't want to name names. I think I saw the politics. I saw the way that the complaints, right? Like there would be a lot of corporate drama, and just to see that, like, my own leadership, right, for as wonderful of people as they are, as good of leaders as they were, right, in limitations, to look up and say, like, wow, people still are really handling this really immaturely, or really, like they feel really insecure or frazzled, or they're also, maybe it was a lot of, they're also running around like, the world is on fire, fire drill after fire drill, right? Like, I get it when you're young and like you don't know boundaries yet. And that was a big learning curve for me. But to look up and see everyone else not have a sense of grounding and like real purpose and real why, I started to see that as like, wait, there's I want something a little bit different, and I'm not seeing that reflected in the leadership above me, at least to the extent I could see. I am really curious because I don't think I've gotten much of your the more extensive version of how you kind of came to the decision to leave and change careers and stuff. Like, what was that internal journey like for you?
I also never had a business mentor that I wanted to become. It never looked good to me where people ended up there. Yeah. I noticed this hollow quality. And I had one vice president at JP Morgan that I worked for who he left the house before his children woke up, and he had like I think a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, something like that. Yeah. And he would be he got back from work after they were asleep. So he wouldn't see his children for 5 days during the work week. And then on the weekend, he was always grinding. And so he was basically completely absent for his children.
Right. And it's kind of like, what's the point, And again, some people to each their own, but I think a lot of people, right, they're doing it from a sense of obligation or not realizing they don't have to. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was, I would say, absolutely no meaning to it.
Yes. Yeah.
It was, we were making presentations for, one company to acquire another company, and there was it did not make the world better in any tangible way. It was purely a game to get more beans.
Make money.
Yeah. So that, and also the rug kept getting pulled out from under people. I kept noticing it's not as stable as it's portrayed.
Sure.
That main part. Actually, you're reliant on your superiors and the structure supporting your role. Yeah. And so it puts a lot of pressure, for your bonus and for your stability. You're hyper scrutinizing the seniors above you. And at any moment, people were getting axed or, something wouldn't work out.
Yeah. I think I didn't fully understand or realize how important being my own boss would be, like to have followed this career for very different reasons. And like, I think I always clearly had an entrepreneurial streak, but I don't think I fully understood what that would be until now I'm in it. And to go back and to say the same thing, like and this is not true of all entrepreneurial paths or self-employed paths, right? But, we have a diversification of, clients and income and all of this where, okay, if one leaves, right, we're still good, right? You get laid off. That's kind of it. Or, right, you're constantly having to, make choices based on, right, what's going to keep you employed or please, your manager and stuff like this. Whereas it's so freeing to, right, have that be totally dependent on myself.
I'm so glad you named that. I don't think I can have a boss again.
I don't think I could either.
Yeah. It's so much better having, for me, I have quite a broad practice, and a lot of people come bi-weekly or monthly. So It ends up being something like 50 clients in my orbit.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that feels so much safer than having one boss. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And I think, we still have the opportunity to have mentors and people above us, right? There's still a lot that, there's value in having that kind of managerial structure or development and stuff like that. But just, I work with a lot of professionals and around a lot of work problems, and right, managing is a hard thing. It's actually really hard to find a good one. It's really, really hard. And the structure just doesn't incentivize, right? For us, getting to be kind of on our own, it means, we are incentivized to develop in the ways that are best for us, right? Rather than this kind of structure of trying to make this performance happen in this. And it's more complicated, I guess.
Yeah. Finding a manager that will develop you and hold you in mind and has high EQ. You were naming how low the EQ often is in business. It's tough to find someone that you can learn from and submit to, essentially.
So yeah, just to kind of finish the story, let's see, I ended up quitting the job, and I went, this was a big thing that I know that not everybody has or will have the opportunity to do, but I said, if this is the one opportunity in my life, right, where I don't have kids, or I can go throw my, little belongings I had from New York City back in my parents' house, right, I decided to go get my yoga teacher training, not to be a yoga teacher, but just because that was the one time I could envision taking 3 weeks off to do it. And I went out to Bali in Southeast Asia. I did the Mecca. I did the whole eat, pray, love thing. And that was absolutely incredible to have that much space and time, right, for my own personal, right? Let me step outside of this world. Let me explore it from a different angle, a different perspective. Let me just explore me. What do I want? What do I find meaning, purpose in, all of that stuff? And I carried that through. I ended up solo backpacking through Southeast Asia for another 4 months and, working, staying and, coming back, teaching yoga and taking a whole year to ultimately kind of play around with different options and stuff before I landed on therapy and grad school being the direction.
Incredible. So doing the yoga training, did that inspire you to take even more time?
Yeah.
Something lit up there?
Yeah, absolutely. I let myself go with a lot of flexibility. I had no kind of timeline in mind for how long I would or wouldn't be gone. I kind of said, you'll feel it out, right? If you want to come home right after the training, great. If you want to keep going, right, you'll kind of know when your time is. So I kind of eventually knew when my time was. But the yoga training was really cool, just in terms of how it dovetailed into the career. I was very strategic about not making it about what I wanted to do with my career path specifically. I had felt like I had spent so much time in my life focusing on what I wanted in my career that this got to be an opportunity to just focus on who I am as a human, or to not dissociate from my body and actually know myself and my body and all of this good stuff. And it's you can't just separate things like that, right? So at the very end of the first week, I just had one of those weird spiritual kind of experiences. I was tired. I was we yoga and meditation all day long, right? Lectures all day long. And I got to the kind of yoga and we finished our hour and a half that morning. We silence every morning, right? And we got to meditation. And I was like, I'm too tired to focus right now. I'm just going to let my mind wander. It's okay. You can chill, Kim. And so I did. I was like thinking about different career things and, well, when I get back, would like it make more sense to go into this direction or that, and I was still thinking in terms of corporate. I was thinking in terms of maybe it was learning and development or something like that, and more coaching or HR or something people focused. And it was almost like as if in like writing, the word psychology just popped up, right? In like white with like yellow, like whatever fuzzy cloud around it and stuff. And I just started bawling. It was the weirdest experience. It was just such a like response, an automatic response to there's some connection happened inside of I've always loved psychology. I've always used it as some part of the career I was following, but I never like went full into it. And it was very clear to me in that moment, like, this is what I'm passionate about. This is what I want to do more of. And I didn't know what it was going to take me to yet, but like, it was a really cool experience. So that led me to, right, again, start as I continued on exploring what career paths might be in that and a little bit more toward that direction.
Do you think you hadn't given yourself permission until then to follow that?
I think that's a good way of putting it. Yeah. Because even if I think back to undergrad, I wanted to be a psych major, but at Berkeley, it's actually very impacted. It's really hard to get into, and it's also very, very science and math and research heavy, which was just not my strong suit. I do partly regret not trying it and seeing if I could have done it. But I think, yeah, there's a lot of, that's not for me, or I can't, I don't know, there's some limiting beliefs around, right? I could have a career around something I was that passionate about. What was I going to do that was going to make the money or whatever? Nobody I knew was a therapist either. It's just not something, I think a lot of us come in as second career. I think that's really, really common. But I think also just like the community, I was part of, right? You go be a doctor, you would go be a lawyer, right? You go go into business, or you go into social, there's nonprofits and all of this stuff. I just like, it almost felt like therapy was like trade, right? Or trade school or professional school or something like that. And we were above that. I'm not sure. I just did not have that as like part of my list of options until later in life.
I so relate. And
yeah.
I'm guessing no one in your family, no uncles or aunts or grandmothers.
No, we didn't go to therapy either. I think therapy, at least I think it's changing a lot in this generation. I'm curious your even exposure to it before. It felt very elusive and unknown to me. The only stereotype I had in my head was, oh, you have to pay hundreds of dollars and you have to have a bad thing to go, right? And that was a big unlock the first time I went to therapy, to find out my insurance covered it. I was like, wait, I could do this for $20 copay, and I could go and not like have some big psychotic break or something, or my parents being divorced, or right. That's why kids got sent to therapy when their parents were divorced, right? I never had that. To go and say, I want to know, I want to work on stuff. I want to explore why I get anxious and stressed at work, and go from there. And there's a whole world, right? But that was so elusive to me until the point I finally decided to give it a try.
I think we forget, we forget how much it's changed in the last 20 years, and particularly with the pandemic.
That's true.
There's a huge normalizing of therapy. When I was younger, I didn't even think it was a real career. I never even saw it on the table as an option.
Yeah. I'm so glad now. I have a younger client. I was telling her the whole spiel we do of, in case we see in public, we won't say hi first just for your confidentiality. I don't ever want you to think I'm ignoring you, And she's like, why would I care about that? I was like, oh, well, I mean, people like legitimately, right? Like there's confidentiality for some people who are, high profile and stuff like that. But she's like, oh my God, I guess I forget that like people have shame around therapy. Me and my friends are always talking about our therapist. And I'm like, I know, us too, but I forget too, that it's not. And in California too, very common. I've talked to like friends, right? I have a friend in London, and she's like, we don't talk about that still. I was like, oh, it's 2024. Okay.
I think we're lucky to be in California. I think it's it's very on board with the, not just therapy, but also mindfulness. and inner
Yes.
work. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree with you that I think most of my clients are very open about being in therapy and see it as something they're proud of or something that sets them apart, or
Yeah.
I'm working on myself, right?
Yeah. It's a wonderful thing. Yeah.
It's
Okay,
such a
so
nice reframe that happened. Yeah.
yeah. Can you share a little bit more about your own snowball and what are some of the things that you consider the powder around you that kind of add to where you are?
Yeah, and in the last couple podcasts, I've gone into it a bit, so I don't want to just traverse the same
Repeat.
ground.
Yes.
Let me
Yes.
see if I can pull something fresh.
Let me ask a better question. Well, okay, just refresh me. What do you consider your core?
Yeah, I liked what you said about I had to first find out who I was and then build a career from there. I really relate to that. I think at first I was trying to, when I traveled for 5 years with my wife, and we probably had 30 business ideas during this 5 years. I remember one of the business ideas was going and sending young boys and girls into old age homes with kettles and tea sets and selling tea equipment and tea to old men and ladies who would be they would be so value the company that then they would invite them in and then they would like purchase something.
Yes.
So I had like those types of ideas that were just sort of like interesting, but they weren't naturally happening. There was a disconnect.
Sure.
The ideas were staying in the idea realm, and I wasn't actually moving on them or building anything.
Yeah.
And so I think the travel period was very refreshing, and it had a similar feel to being because we were in Thailand and Vietnam and China and these kinds of places. So I think it woke me up again, and I think I got a sense of I'm here.
Yeah.
There's
that
a
was,
real,
I mean, I think, to be in those countries specifically was important to me to add and fill to my cup and my well of like more Eastern philosophy and Eastern thinking and Eastern ways of living, right? To come back to the West and, right, really say this is not, right? There was so much inspiration that you can do things differently, right?
Yeah, I think that Eastern traditions are so rich.
Yeah.
I want to keep drawing from those traditions.
Yeah,
I
even
do think
the
that
idea, right? Intergenerational, right? The homes and support are so much more common out there, right? To have the kids and the grandparents actually be, right? We lack that here, and to like bring it here is an incredible idea.
Sure.
But I was going to say,
Karen,
I love, and I have a really big appreciation for even just what you said earlier about, right, when you were kind of at JP Morgan and stuff. Permission almost comes up for me too, right? The idea that you as a human, as like a brilliant thinker, a brilliant brain, I'll say this a million times, right? Like,
thank you.
What a disservice, right? To be behind decks and slides of just doing mergers and acquisitions when you are the type of person who has all of these ideas and creativity and things like that, and to find a career where you actually got to and get to put that into fruition, it's a shame, right? When all of that is kind of not actually used. And if you think, now I'm getting big picture. If you think of all the people, right, in those kinds of careers that have so much more potential to give to the world and stuff, right? And what a shame it is, right, when that's wasted in a lot of the way that we have structured society right now.
I think it's the great tragedy that the majority of us are spending our time on things that we can't feel as meaningful. I think of Spain giving away its gold to India for pepper, giving away something really valuable for something that ends up not, becoming quite common. And
that's a good way to put it.
I think the travel period worked something, and Alan Watts was to pull something fresh. Alan Watts was an important thinker to me during the travel. Yeah, I remember the very first video I watched of his. He was talking about environmental collapse and how the Western psyche was inevitably going to produce environmental collapse. Yeah. And something in me just knew that's true. There's something very solid about this framework.
Yeah.
And then so I deep dived into his work, and it worked on me, I would say, over the course of the travel.
Yeah.
And
How do you,
yeah.
if you haven't already said this on the podcast, how do you continue to fill, right, the well or the fresh powder? Because I think that's something that I feel like I have good systems, I have good things that consistently do it. But there is sometimes grief when I revisit that time of taking away so much time and going and traveling and having such a peak inspiration. And I think that's not sustainable to do often, right? But sometimes there's a grief of, right, how far away that is and the opportunity to be able to do that kind of stuff again.
Yeah, I experienced some of that grief as well. I think that there are these special times where you really fill up the well, and then you draw from that well for the next several years.
Yeah, that's true.
I would say, my inspiration was coming from books and travel during that period. And now I would say that's shifted into human relationships being the place where I learn. Yeah.
Well, that's a great way to put it. I do remember when I was traveling, right? I loved learning from people. That was actually a huge piece of, right, building new relationships and, right, getting new perspectives. And I am someone who has some social anxiety, right? And so it was a good experience for me to go out, put myself out there, right? And people aren't scary and they're interesting and all this stuff. And one of the reasons I came home when I did was because the allure of being a digital nomad, right, started to kind of get old to me personally. First of all, Wi-Fi.
You were doing your marketing job on the road?
I actually still had some freelance jobs going on to kind of fund the travel. It wasn't much. It was maybe 10 hours a week or something like that, which goes very far out there. But yeah, finding Wi-Fi in cafes all the time was very exhausting. But it also was I'm so far from my people that I have really long-standing, deep relationships with, right? It was a constant churning of new people at this hostel or this yoga, this or whatever, and then you wouldn't see them again. And I really missed my relationships back home. And I think that is something that, right, to be rooted here, right, and use that as a source for a well. I think that's a great way of putting it.
I think the New Age community is often quite transient, and you get refreshed and you touch into who you are, but it's very hard to hang on to those communities, I found.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think because sometimes I'll think about it. I'm like, wow, why have I lost touch with so much of that or so much of that? And I think maybe there is a little bit of that's the nature of it. And the things that have been lasting for me are still more grounded, right? Both in, this higher spiritual whatever, and kind of just the boring reality of the world, right? Your family, the loved ones, right? And not to call either, label either, but I think there's something to that, the groundedness that some of that less new agey stuff actually does have.
Yeah, so you brought it back and invested into your local networks, your long-standing relationships, and maybe retained some connection to something you found.
Right. And I think that's a cool part too, right? Those communities and stuff I'll still tap into every once in a while, or right, I follow them on social media and stuff. And so they still lead me to, or still give me inspiration, or maybe I'll go to an event or something like that. But it's not right where I live primarily anymore. That was, I guess that was a special time and place, and it wasn't forever, Where I live now is, with my husband. And then I love that. I would never give that up to, right, be, traveling around the world, maybe together, but, different seasons for different reasons. Is that what they say?
It rhymes.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in turning it back to you on how you continue to fill up the well. And I want us to get into the topic of burnout a bit. And you're emerging as, I want to say, the queen of burnout, or the queen of the topic of burnout, someone who has a voice in this, at this frontier for a problem that is widespread, that almost everyone is facing in some way, it feels to me.
Yeah. Okay. So let me see. I'll speak a little bit maybe to, some of my own experiences with burnout, some of my own experiences with the well, but then also kind of more broadly to kind of what I see and what I help clients with. So yeah, I mean, I'll say this first. Burnout is such a big word, and I use it to capture a lot of different experiences, right? There's a very clinical version of burnout where it's, right, this is the syndrome, right? A lot of people, once you hit that, right, and your body's on shutdown, it really is. It's, a real condition, right? You might be experiencing fatigue, you might be experiencing cynical thoughts about work, and you might be experiencing, right, a whole host of other very, clinical symptoms. And then I also use it to capture, right, like, okay, yesterday was maybe a really extra emotionally taxing day. I saw too many clients or whatever it was. And I woke up and my body does feel burnout, right? It's fried, right? But it doesn't mean I'm in full, life stage of burnout, right? But I use it to capture. We can talk about all of the above. So yeah, I've had my own experiences with burnout. Definitely when I was in corporate, I had versions of it. Very high stress, right? Very putting stress on myself. I think I'm very much, I didn't need to have as much stress or rush around as much as I did. I think it's part of the culture, and it's still a huge part of the culture at a lot of organizations. I hate the word fire drill, because what we're doing is we're creating urgency that is not, right, life or death. And when we do that, fire, right? Fire literally evokes fight or flight in our body. And, just because a client, we need to get an email back to them by XYZ, it's not a fire drill, right? It's not a fire.
The false deadlines killed me in business.
Yeah, we shouldn't be putting our bodies in a state of fight or flight or in a state of survival constantly. And that's the problem. And that's where a lot of people, right? That's where burnout happens, is because that's a chronic state now, right? It's even, I have clients go, well, it's not like I was that stressed or that, whatever it was, but it's constant, right? Our baseline cortisol level, or our baseline amount of stress that we are going in and out of work day after day and not flushing out and not refreshing, right? It leads us to the body. What it does once it reaches that, it has a cumulative amount of stress in the body, it goes to shut down, right? That's just what it does to make sure that we survive, right? Hypoarousal, right? We might call it in therapy terms. So, right, I've dealt with, that was, corporate and stuff. And I think leaving and trying something totally different and traveling and stuff was a really great way to recover from that. Now, not everybody has that opportunity, but I think that you can find it in a lot of other ways, right? Maybe it's actually going on a small retreat or something like that, or maybe it's just taking the weekend to recover, or really actually using your vacation this summer to recover, right? A lot of people will go and still be on their phones and whatever, right? Use that time to fill the well, right? Bring a book that's inspiring or gives you a different perspective, or actually, right, spend time with yourself, journal, right? Do those kinds of things. Let me see. Okay, so ways that I fill the well, or that I kind of keep my snow fresh around me. I'd say I'm a big systems person, so that I make sure the well always has like a certain level, right? And that's because most people, right, human nature, we don't have great willpower or memory, right? If you've got the systems, if you've got the habits in place, right, you are guaranteeing that, right? You've got,
yes,
you're keeping yourself. Yeah.
James Clear has a great aphorism around this. You don't.
I recommend. Yeah.
Yeah, he's great. You don't rise to your willpower. You fall to your systems.
That's correct. Yeah. I got to use that quote more. Yeah. So Atomic Habits, everyone should read. But yeah, so for me, right, systems such as, right, my client load and my client hours are very specific, right? So that I'm not accidentally, right, just fitting you in, and then now I've had too many clients in a day, right? That's to keep, whatever. But I also have systems around things that fill me. So for example, every morning, not every morning, but most mornings, I try to go for a walk with a podcast, and it's my favorite part of the day. It's where I'm actually, finding something to, again, new perspectives. Those are the things that do it for me, right? And so just to get out in the morning and have someone else be talking about some new idea or some way of doing something, right, keeps that kind of going for me. to have fresh ideas, fresh perspectives, right? I'm not falling into this one way of thinking or doing things. Other ones, yoga, I actually like considering not as as a way to fill the snow around. Because there are times that I'll go into a yoga class and the teacher will say something inspiring, or I will work through something, right? And that's like adding to my snow. But I actually think it's a really good way of getting rid of all the twigs and shit that you collect while you went down the mountain, right? It's like I do hot yoga classes. Yes. So it's like it's melting off all the like stuff that you don't want on there so that you can kind of refresh, right? So
I just want to say that you're a high watermark for me in terms of someone who's very boundaried and has really created a system around your body, and that you don't just feel the pressure to have a week that is twice as much as you should. Or you're someone who I feel has been very good at setting those boundaries.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You know, it's not always easy, but it's gotten a lot easier for me when one of the things that I said from the very beginning was, I'm not getting into this next career to burn out again, right? And I know, there's real reasons that therapists burn out. It's a really high, there's a lot that we carry from our clients emotionally, their stress, right? There's hard things in our career too, right? And I knew that it could be really common for therapists to burn out. And so I went in from day one with the intention of, even if this is, going to take me longer, or even if, people, might be doing it a different way, or, different reasons, like these are my boundaries for now, so that it's, I am able to show up for my clients. And I've had clients, I'm sure you have too, right? Come from other therapists that they didn't love. Some I'm sure were, right, lack of experience, all of this, but like I hear some that just, right, they can't be present because they are, right? They're too tired and burned out, right? I noticed, very, very rare, but every once in a while I'll have a day where I am starting to not listen to my client, or get a little zoned out, or get a little bored or something like that. And it's not about the client. I know immediately that's about, oh, okay, something's going on for me. So yeah, I think it's both ways. It's to protect myself, but it's also to be a good therapist. And I think that's a big responsibility that we carry, to make sure that we are actually able to provide the services that our clients are paying us for.
I think your clients are lucky that you tend to yourself so well. And you lit up when you're talking about your morning walk. That feels so important, that you get that moment as you start the day.
Yeah. It's good you notice that, because it's one of those things, it's the smallest thing, right? But it means so much to me. I'm like, I could die happy if like nothing else in my life was but I got my morning walk every day. It's total me time. There's no pressure, and I'm always just interested in learning about something, seeing the like plants, whatever it is. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. I'm imagining Snow White, with all the birds and the new blossoms.
Yeah.
I think doing mindfulness and yoga and these things, you start to appreciate simple moments like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's to realize you can do so much more with so much less is actually pretty big, because our society, and I can even tell I'm talking fast on this podcast, right? Our society is so go, 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 and rush, 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 and do more, more, more. That's the hamster wheel, right? That I think it's just the assumption that we need more to get more, right? I need more money, or I need the bigger thing, or whatever it is. And those practices really show us how much we're missing in the present moment, in the here and now. In yoga, they call it the subtle body, right? I remember the very first time, like I was in a yoga class, and I don't know if this will translate to other people, but for me, like the first time I really felt myself just like laying there and kind of breathing, and my hand going up and down on my belly, like it was a really weirdly spiritual, connective experience for me. I was like, physically, I was like, I don't know. I just felt really connected to myself and the idea that like, God, this whole universe, right, is incredible. I don't even have to think about breathing. And yet here I am breathing and living. And we take that for granted because you don't see it when you're, heads down and moving from one thing to another. How much like is a miracle just all around us. So yeah, I think it's a really good reminder that we can slow down a lot and not lose things. We gain things when we do.
Yeah, since you brought up your morning walks, I feel more spacious.
Yeah, like I said, it's the silliest thing. I don't need a bigger house or a bigger car or whatever it is. It's if I have, that's the time and money trade-off too, that like is constant for everybody, but especially in therapy, right? I could always see more clients, but then I lose time. And to me, that morning walk and the time I could be seeing a client it's not even worth an amount. It's priceless to me, right? You could not give me so much more money what would I do with it? Okay, yes, I'd go on a nice vacation, whatever, but like, I don't know. I don't need that. I need this morning walk. It's really, really wonderful.
We had a conversation last night with the doula. We're about to have a child.
Yeah.
And literally her face came in on the Zoom, and literally within 2 seconds, my body was like, yes, this person. Because there was a feeling of fullness that came through even before she spoke. That I could feel that she was fully occupying herself.
Yeah. Present. There for you.
Exactly.
Like, so, yeah.
I think so many people are in this chasing realm of hungry ghosts place where their cup is empty and they're trying to work harder to eventually get to the full, but it never quite comes.
Yeah.
And then I think there is something where people slow down and allow that fullness to enter.
Yeah.
And then some people are operating from that place of fullness. And when you come across it, it's such a delight.
Yeah, I agree. It's, I don't know, to be really, to have experiences with those type of people too, right? How amazing is that? It's almost contagious, right? And that's one of the things you can read all about this stuff in books and everything. But right, when you go to therapy or when you work with, right, whoever it is, whatever groups, whatever peer groups maybe it even is, right? When you surround yourself with the right people or right supports, right? How powerful that can be because you're tuning to their nervous system, right? You get that opportunity to say, wow, this person is really slow and I can be really slow and I am safe, or they're right, that we're good.
Yeah, this person, there was this bubbly quality where they were kind of like just naturally would laugh, or just this like almost this fountain of energy that I could see this person had been tending to themselves. The energy was just naturally coming out of them.
Yeah. Isn't that, the truth too, right? We can really see it on people. I think it's one of those things you don't often see in yourself, but right, you see it when somebody is burned out or fried or frazzled or, driving and functioning from a place that's not them. And you see the power and the gravity and the, strength when someone, right, is like in their seat. And those are things that are soft skills and intangibles, even when it comes to things like career and the workplace. That's partly what gives you success too. I think we take for
more
granted.
Than partly. I think it's the main thing.
It's all, yeah. If you look at Oprah, right? She's always my go-to, right? That's, that's not working harder. She works very hard, right? But that's embodying, right?
Yeah. You might call it good energy or bad energy. Not to put a binary on it, but I don't think we can hide our issues. I think we are communicating our inner life.
Yeah. You bring up that you're going to be a new parent soon, and I'm curious, what is it that you want to, as a parent, teach your kid kind of early on or instill in them that maybe you did or didn't get yourself, or that you hope for them?
Good question. Such a good therapist. I would say the thing that I'm most wanting to anchor is attunement. So slowing myself down and
Yes.
really connecting with this being.
Yeah.
Appreciating how much potential is packed into that tiny little body.
Yeah.
Yeah, so being present to what emerges and not... My pattern would be to go into my head and start strategizing and thinking ahead, and that cuts me off from connection.
Me too. I'm right there with you. But hearing you say that, I'm really glad that I'm going to take that forward with my whenever I'm a parent. It is, right? It's not just about the things you teach your kids via, right, words and advice and stuff like that. It's literally the way you are with them. When you slow down, and what a synergistic thing, is that the right word there, right? That when you really attune to a baby who is going slowly and at the pace of nature and just there and just breathing and crying and all that, right? But you attune to them, right? They attune to you being slow and present and, right, all of these things that are that fullness you talked about, as opposed to, okay, let me make sure you get in the right preschool, and let me make sure you know the right you're doing, and let me make sure, all the things that I'm sure I will do. But, right, how much more important even just that is.
Totally. There's a book that I'm getting a lot from right now, which is Hold On to Your Kids.
Okay.
Have you heard of that?
I haven't. I'll write it down.
Yeah. It's Gabor Mate and Gordon Neufeld. It keeps emphasizing that parenting is all about a relationship. There's not tools and strategies are that approach has damaged parenting.
Yes.
Actually tending to the specifics of the relationship.
Yeah.
That's the work of parenting, not the regimented or getting certain things instilled or pushed into your child.
It's beautiful, because that's what is lifelong, right? Not only carrying into, right, through the hardships of elementary school and middle school and whatever, and then later on in life, but that's the right caregiver that's internalized, right? That relationship, and you carry that into your next relationship and all of those things. And even if we go back to the idea of burnout, right, and why we get burned out, because we are chasing and we are running and we are doing, right, things that increase our chronic stress because we're trying to fill maybe the hole that was, right, that not internalized relationship or caregiver or right, externalized, right, I have someone to go talk to and right, have that closeness and connectedness with.
I like how this conversation has evolved into importance of relationship.
Yeah.
Slowing down and appreciating simple things.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to get caught up in that mentality of trying to get lots done and get further in life, but then you're kind of missing the show.
Again, sometimes more is actually less.
So do you see shifts in this mentality, the moving from burnout into something else? Is that something you actually see clients achieving when they work with you?
Sure. Yeah. I think it's the ability to slow down, the permission, I think, is a big one, to set boundaries, right? And to not have to do so much, but then to be doing that for a reason, right? To connect with the things that actually give you life again, maybe, is a big one. A lot of people, right, even if we describe burnout as a literal biological clinical response to stress, I also really like to metaphorically, and it's the reason we're stressed, right, is because we're doing something out of alignment, right? So to see people make space for things that actually light them up, right? It's like burnout is literally a candle has burned out. The flame is gone, right? It's finding what is the flame and relighting it. I think that's a big change I see in people. I see certain clients learn to slow down really well, but I think that's actually a pretty advanced place to be in therapy. So I actually see a lot of clients, right, do kind of the first steps of, right, actually just restructuring, just saying, I can do less of this, I can do more of that, I can find more energy again. That's most common to start. And then, right, when you get a little bit more, you've been doing this for a while, right? And that's when I start to see clients actually really do the subtle body stuff, right? Or the really present moment stuff and all of that. That takes a long time. I would say my first year in therapy, I remember very well that I didn't remember or pick up anything. It wasn't for lack of a good therapist. It was like all of the things she'd say to me, right? Like went way over my head and did not stick. And they kind of were like settling in there, right? But it's one of those things I think I often forget to appreciate, just the really long, beautiful process of therapy. So yeah, I think to really, really slow down is a beautiful thing I see some clients get to, but not like the first thing that they get to. I don't know. Do you have that experience?
Yeah, I think there's some hard realities in this question. That if you're working for a very money-oriented mega corporation,
right,
you can impose some boundaries and you can do some things, but there's a strong gravitational pull away from your authenticity in those worlds often. Yeah. And I think making changes around the edges can be very helpful and can make something sustainable, and money is important in life. And so people who make that work, I think there's an art to making corporate life work for you, and some can do that. And I respect that. I think the what I'm really interested in is this: when you're snowballing, you're like fully on your alignment. You're continually readjusting, finding your center, really tuning into your authenticity, not speaking falsehoods, or, when you become aware of doing something that's off your alignment, you make an adjustment.
Yep.
And finding your deeper purpose like that, I think that is one of the great life challenges. That is a difficult thing, and people have to support you and buy into it, and you're doing it in relationship with your community.
Yep.
You can't just decide you're doing it and it works. Like, it has to kind of come together in a way.
Yeah.
So I think that's why therapy is helpful, to keep giving a space for a seedling to become a sapling, to become a small tree, to eventually find its place in the forest.
Right.
That the forces could trample it if it's exposed too quickly.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
So I think when you were talking about burnout earlier, and you were talking about the two types, the kind of, and I want to call the one type full cap burnout. Put some exclamations on either side.
Yeah.
That kind of burnout where there's an absolute collapse and your body just won't carry on. And I actually had that in business. Like I had to drag my body out of bed in the morning. My body did not want to go to work.
Yeah.
And I had serious health problems. $7,000 of dental bills, collapsed lung.
Yeah.
In all kinds of ways, the stress was
killing
me. Yes.
Yeah.
And so then my body did need a full refresh after that.
Recovery. Yeah.
And then there's the let's call it small case burnout.
Yeah. Big B, little B.
So I do have days where I'm exhausted at the end. Yeah. But then my energy pops right back up, I find. With just a little bit of rest and my energy is back.
I think that's it.
Yeah. And I think it's because
there's some
I'm
resilience
on my path.
to it, because exactly that, you're in the right place and you still are a human with physical limitations.
Yes, and I'm not exposed to politics and long-term detrimental power relationships where I actually am powerless in certain ways, and that I think that delivers a toxic stress which really impacts you much more than you realize.
Absolutely, right? The way that you're talking about not being able to get out of bed, right? That's literally the body fighting. That's a part of you that knows this is not right or out of alignment. And if it can see that there's another day on the other side after you take a break, go do your thing, right? Get a massage. Okay, it's not going to fight as hard. But if it knows, yeah, even if you go on vacation, you're coming straight back to this. There's no end in sight. You're not listening to me, right? It's just going to keep fighting. It is. It turns into literally toxic stress, right? But it's easier to think about it. It's a part of you that's speaking up.
Definitely. Yeah, I like the metaphor of the rider and the horse, that the horse being the body and the rider being the brain.
Yeah.
And then we can, if you've been flogging your horse for a decade, the one little drink of water may not, and then going right back to flogging your horse, that horse is going to start resisting you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So working with the horse, starting to incorporate the horse's natural needs is important. You can only impose your will on nature for so long.
Right. And again, that's being holistic, right? With your brain and who you are and what your needs are, right? Yes, there's a need for money, right? If we just went the other direction and only pursued our passions without thinking about that, okay, there's going to be a pullback there because whatever, right? You're not making ends meet or something like that. But right, if we just pursue one without the other, it's really starting to recognize and value every part that's in there, right? Every you have many needs, and it's finding a balance. It takes time to find that balance. But if we're not listening to one, that's how literal dysfunction in the brain and body happens. We isolate it, we push it to the side. That's not going to last very long.
Do you incorporate mindfulness, this yogic spirit we're talking about, to sessions? How does that look?
I wish I did it more and more intentionally. I'm actually thinking about going and getting a mindfulness-based stress reduction training or something like that. I do, sometimes I'll start session with a little mindfulness if I can tell either me or the client has come in a little fast-paced, right? I'll slow us down, say, you want to take a couple deep breaths, or I don't know what to talk about today. Okay, why don't we close our eyes and like just go inward, right? I'll make it a little bit of a practice. It's not something I do in every session. Not that every session needs it, but I'd always like to do it a little bit more. So I do that, right, in terms of just the flavor of the session, helping to create, what do I want to call it? A practice, right? Clients actually get that real-time experience. We'll talk a lot about the power and usefulness of meditative practices or yoga or something like that to slow us down in their lives outside. And that's always something. Every client is starting with a different thing, but I really like to address things outside of session. We do real deep healing work in a lot of sessions. But right, I want them to be integrating and I want them to be actually doing stuff outside of our work, right? So we'll talk about that. And then a big part of how I'm using mindfulness and meditation and more even guided visualization, most recently I'm doing a lot of that in terms of kind of almost more on the EMDR or even parts work front, right? It's a way of not doing the insight meditation as much, right, as doing really being able to go into right brain, being able to go into deeper thought scalings, needs and stuff like that we don't always get to address every day. That's probably the primary I'm using it right now, but I'm always looking to keep expanding that.
I think of that second category you described there as interactive mindfulness.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
That we don't have to withdraw to be mindful. There can be a connection in us. Yeah. I want to bring in one more element, which is something I think about with you. I think about your yogic mindfulness background, and then I think about you as a very creative person. And you inspired me to start a newsletter because your newsletter, impacted me. And you built a beautiful website, and you are putting lots of different creative offerings into the world in terms of articles and podcasts and different things. And so I feel the spirit of creativity in your approach. And I'm curious how you view the importance of creativity, or how you weave that in, or Is creativity important in the work of being a therapist or in therapy itself?
Yeah. Oh, it's so important in the work of therapy, I think. And I'm still, right? I love this question because it's a continuous but very prominent exploration to me right now. So, I'll answer the last question first. In therapy, I love being creative, right? It keeps it engaged, but I also think it keeps it more impactful and memorable, right? Which is why I love doing things like let's actually go in and do parts work or do something interesting or take out a piece of paper, right, and write or draw or do something, right? That's a little bit different. It breaks us out of the shell of just left brain, just talking, right? In terms of my own creativity, it is something that I know this about myself, but sometimes I forget it. I'm a creative person, right? And I think
1,000%.
I think I've been personally pretty heads down most recently. It's, as you know, I was planning a wedding. So that was creative, right?
That
it
was
stressful, but it was
huge act
creative.
of creativity. Yeah.
But I was very much like, okay, so I'm going to do my client work and that's it. I'm not going to do extra stuff, right? Like writing and all of that. And I miss it. I always miss it. And so I'm getting back into it. I'm dabbling. And it's a constant exploration of, right, sometimes we do things, right, functionally or purposefully because they lead to somewhere else, right? Like, will this get me more clients or build my business or something like that? And if not, then okay, well, is it worth my time? And most recently, I've been missing it because I've just been missing that part of me, of creative expression, of stuff like that. So I've been trying to get back into it as a sense of creativity for creativity's sake, right? Because there's an inherent, it makes my work better when I'm able to, right? Even this podcast, right, was something that I wouldn't have done a little bit ago just because I didn't have the time and I didn't think it was going to add anything to the business. And now it's just, wait, if I talk about this stuff more, right, then I go into my work and I'm more inspired and I have more thoughts from someone like Steve, right? All of this kind of stuff. So that's something that I've been working on personally recently. And I'll say this last thing, but my clients have been inspiring me creatively a ton lately. And I think it's because the more I grow in my career, right, the more interesting and cool clients, we find each other, right? We grow and we find the clients that are at kind of our level of growth. And I've had quite a few clients recently who are incredible entrepreneurs and incredibly successful and incredibly creative in a way that, like, I didn't even imagine for myself. And I'm going, wow, I love what they're doing. I can do that too, or I can explore that about myself, right? Like, that's the really cool synergistic part about therapy too. And so the more I get to be creative too, the more then I get to inspire the next client when they see, right, what I'm doing and what I'm exploring as well. It's all, right, this beautiful back and forth.
I so agree. I find that, firstly, the podcast, I've found it incredibly enriching and inspiring. This one, but, being in the flow of these conversations has been feeding into my thinking and my work.
It's part of the snow, right? Yeah.
And then the client work, I am hugely inspired by clients.
Yeah.
I think we get so much
We're
back.
so freaking lucky. Yeah.
I think the whole game, is inspiration.
Yeah. I think so too.
Like, the more when we see someone else doing something, we realize we can.
Yes, absolutely. Right? It's examples, permission.
Yes, I feel that just hearing you speak. Yeah, and I think seeing your newsletter, seeing your energy in the world inspires me to do more.
I can't say enough the other way. I would have had no idea that any of my stuff does that for you. So that's really cool. And that's one of the things I value most about this relationship.
Great. Well, I think that's a nice note for us to finish on. Inspiration.
Yeah. This is great, Steve. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I love this. I love that you're doing it.
And likewise, I respect your work and I want people to come and work with you. Do you want to tell them where you are and how they can find you?
Sure. Yep. So I am based in Pasadena, California, if you are looking in person, but I see clients virtually all throughout California. I've got lots of people in the Bay as well as LA and stuff like that. So kimbielak.com, right now. That may be changing soon as my married name, and I'm even looking at different business names. But for now, that's it.
Kim Bielak.
Yeah.
You can
Do
also
you
find
have
her
show
on-
notes or something? Or
Yeah. I'll
Okay,
put your
perfect.
website, and she's
Yeah.
also you're on the Beyond Psychology
Oh,
network, so
perfect.
it's another place. Cool. Well, thank you so much, and
Yeah.
I look forward to continuing this
Yeah, we'll chat
inspiration
soon.
with each other. Great.
All right.
Cheers.
Bye, Steve.